Are you confusing what you do with who you are? In this episode of the Lead Machine Growth Show, we welcome professional development mentor Mark Aylward to explore the powerful connection between clarity and confidence. Mark shares why clarity is the foundation of real growth. And as we were talking a minute ago, uh, personal growth and professional growth are inexplicably linked. And so this is why tactics fall flat without a simple strategy and what true leadership really looks like in action. And if you've ever felt stuck chasing job titles or checking boxes, this conversation will help you get recentered, refocused, and ready to move forward with real purpose. Mark explains why looking for work is broken and what you can do about it.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show, where you will discover how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. Paul Guyon, the mastermind behind the Lead Machine, introduces you to trailblazers who inspire you to implement life-changing solutions and systems you can model to nurture your leads and get your offers seen by your ideal clients who will invest in themselves and you. Be sure you visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, tune in and get ready to transform your vision into reality.
Welcome to the Lead Machine Growth Show. I'm Paul Guyon, your host, lead machine coach, and the founder of the Lead Machine Marketing Group and Mastermind. I'm dedicated to helping you tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business and professional life and personal life to the next level, let's get this conversation started and turn your dreams into reality. So Mark has a marketing background from the University of Notre Dame and has a passion for helping others find their way. With over 30 years of experience, he's worked with people from all walks of life, guiding them through career transitions and personal growth. He has been involved in various roles, including mentoring with the Central Florida Coalition for the Homeless and Notre Dame's Guyon Center for Entrepreneurship. After years in the recruiting industry, where he successfully founded and sold 2 staffing companies, Mark shifted his focus to mentoring others. Now he focuses on supporting adults in their professional development, particularly in the areas of leadership and confidence. His approach is centered around kindness and personal accountability, helping people discover their strengths and passions. So Mark, hey brother, thank you so much for coming today. I appreciate it. I appreciate you and what you're doing. And did I get all that right?
That sounded great, Paul. Who was that guy you were talking about?
I think it's always a good idea to write your own bio. But have someone else speak it and say, "Oh gosh, is that really me?"
That was nice. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure. So Mark, why and how did you had these staffing companies? So I imagine while you had the staffing companies, and maybe even earlier, but you realized that part of the success of those companies had to have been mentorship and personal development.
Yeah.
What was the spark that started all that?
Yeah, it's a long story. Let me see if I can abridge it in deference to your audience and with respect to you. I found out when I was 26 that my girlfriend was pregnant, and was kind of wandering in terms of what I was going to do professionally, a little bit lost. That was a wake-up call, and it was an immediate, instantaneous wake-up call. And fast forwarding after that incident, I suppose, I went looking for work with a passion, with a focus, with intention, which are all things I talk about in my mentorship now, particularly intention. And I walked into the condominium my parents were living in at the time, and my mother was there with her best friend from childhood who had just remarried an Australian gentleman, and they were sitting around having a glass of wine, just talking. None of them knew. My parents did, but these new people didn't know my circumstance. But I started talking to this gentleman, and I said, I'm in this bind and I'm looking to do something that I can sink my teeth into and support my family. Do you mind if I ask, what do you do? And he said, oh, sure. And he started telling me about the fact that he was a recruiter of petrochemical engineers for Saudi Arabian oil companies. And after he
Wow.
unpacked that for me, I said, I thought companies hired their own people. And he said, well, many do, but particularly companies that are looking for very specific critical skill, advanced degree type skills that are in high demand and limited supply, they go out to outside agencies, of which I am one. And I happen to specialize in this particular area because I have a petrochemical background and I have got some relationships in the Middle East. And a lot of people don't want to go live in the Middle East. So what we've worked out are 3-year contracts where the Saudi Arabian oil company folks will hire people for 3 years, give them a home, give them a car, pay their expenses, and pay them 4 or 5 times what they would get paid in the States. And then they would, leave that contract and go off and do whatever, having put 10 years worth of earnings in their pocket in 3 years. And I said, well, not to poke around, but how do you get paid? And he said, we get a percentage of the first year's starting salary. And I said, can we do that math? And he said, sure. He said they get $200,000 or $300,000 typically to start, and my fee is 25% of that. And that was the moment I became a recruiter. And so I answered an ad in the Sunday newspaper, and I went to an interview on Monday, and they hired me on the spot and stuck me in what was called the software engineering group. So, and then to continue the abridged version, my first placement was a single father of 3 young children who was about to lose his home. He was an electrical engineer, and I found him a job. And the congratulatory conversation I had with him was a life-changing moment for me when I thought, this is what I was meant to do. And so that was how I got in. And then I worked for someone else for 5 years and then started my own organization. So we can go into any of those nooks and crannies you'd like, but that tells you how it all began.
And so, yeah, that's a very niche. I've talked to and worked with recruiters before, and IT recruiters. I've been in the IT field for 40 plus years, and I often get very often get solicitations on LinkedIn and things like that. So I'm interested in how you grew that business and you came to walk away from it. There was something there that made you do that. What was it?
Yeah, well, how I came to it, the notion of being in a niche, the notion of specialization in particular, was something that I learned very early on from my mentors. All were big proponents of specialization. And because when you specialize, and you know this, Paul, from any entrepreneurial exercise, is when you specialize, the value proposition is more interesting. The margins are typically higher. The respect you get as an expert, you can get to that position more quickly because all you do is talk to people that do this. And so the benefits of specializing in one thing as opposed to trying to serve everybody probably are an entire podcast unto itself. But that's why I started continuously specializing as I moved deeper and deeper into IT. And at the time, at least, and maybe still, software was beginning to drive everything. Hardware was becoming more obsolete and software was starting to drive everything. So I got lucky on some level as well. And then how I got out was somewhat forced by a pretty contentious divorce. I was forced to sell my last company. And fast forward from that, I represented myself as my own attorney and got custody of my kids. So that can tell you a little bit about how crazy that circumstance was. But after that, I was playing mother and father to some young teenagers. And so what I did is I decided I'm not going to put myself in a position where I have to go into an office anymore and have employees. So I'm going to figure out this consulting space. I've got all this experience and wisdom gained from doing this for 30 years, and everybody can benefit from how to get a little better professionally. So I started going to all of the volleyball games and little league games and teachers meetings and doctor's appointments with my laptop and my cell phone, and I conducted business from anywhere. And I exchanged my time for money. And as I started helping my kids out of high school and college, they came back with feedback saying, Dad, I don't think you understand how good what you know is for kids like us, because no one teaches this in school.
Ah,
So I think that you need to figure out a way to get this in the hands of more people. I think the world is hungry for what you know, and looking for work is intimidating and anxiety ridden and often challenging. So that was kind of an epiphany, and I just started looking into that. And between now and then, I've just been further automating and scaling and figuring out, what it is, who I want to serve and how I want to serve them. And that's where this clarity and confidence stuff started popping up and resonating with me.
gotcha. And so now you're your own boss, right? So what,
Yeah.
first of all, before you go there, I
Yep.
want to congratulate you for bringing up your kids to be aware enough and courageous enough to give their old man, give their father some, hey, Dad, you should really be doing this.
Yeah,
That's pretty awesome. I mean,
it is.
I've got a couple of kids that are like that. Some of them not so much,
Mhm.
but that's amazing that you would get that kind of feedback from them. A blessing.
It is. It was, and it was one of the ironies when I look back on being a single father and actually playing mom and dad with sole custody is as challenging as that was at the time. What I also end up with is a much closer relationship with my kids because I was functioning as both mother and father, and my listening skills improved dramatically. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
so you probably took some of that, and I asked you a question about what's the hardest thing about being your boss. I'm sure that you were prepped for that, being mom and dad to those kids.
Mhm.
But what was the hardest thing that you found being your own boss?
Well, it's, when I was working, when I was running my companies, I would get up and I would go to work, and there was a physical location, and there were, 20 some odd employees in the office and 100 consultants out working. So I was, once I reached a level of momentum, which was pretty quick with my partner, generating revenue, making profits, expanding, being flush with cash, that happened pretty quickly. There was always some schedule or some other person or people that had to do with my schedule. I had to meet so and so. I had to call so and so. I had to be over here. I had to be over there. The sales meeting starts at 9. The financial meeting is at 5 o'clock. There was always a structure to my day,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had to worry about what to do. I always had somebody who wanted to tell me what to do next, and
Yeah.
I was in the business of discernment. What's important, what's urgent, what's not.
Yeah.
Now on my own, I got to wake up every day and figure out what I'm going to do today. Like my girlfriend now will ask me every once in a while, what's on the agenda for today? And if it's still yesterday, I tell her I don't know yet. Go talk to me at 9 o'clock tomorrow.
So you've got one of those.
Yeah,
One of
well,
those
it's not it's I'm exaggerating to make a point,
Yeah.
but I think that because I do have structure and routine and systems and such, but yeah, I think the burden of having to determine what it is that's important today is unique to a solopreneur, is unique to someone who's his own boss, I think.
Yeah. And I'm a full-time employee as well as a solo entrepreneur, transitioning from full-time corporate work to to agency work and solo entrepreneurship. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a musician, so
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of irons in the fire. And having someone who you can rely on and say, well, you're spending an awful lot of time on this. Is that really moving the needle for you? I get those kinds of questions, and I'm glad that your girlfriend asked you those kinds of questions, because she'll ask me, so what's on the agenda today? What are you doing? Well, I'm doing this. And sometimes I have a structure and a method, but sometimes I have to do sprints.
Mm-hmm.
I sprint and do something and get something done to a certain point, to a certain milestone, and said, I'm going to take this next hour and work on this alone, because I know I got to get it, and I know I don't have any more than an hour to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like that for you too? or are you able to focus for longer periods of time, or is it kind of sprints like I have to do?
I was never, up until recently, a couple of years ago, I was never really a big routine guy, and I was never really, although I ran my companies with systems, I was hypocritical in making myself adhere to systems in my own life. But
Yeah.
I found a practice, and it's a spiritual practice. I'm Catholic. We were talking about that early.
Yeah. Me too.
But it's a spiritual operating system concept that if you approach work with joy and ease, that it's possible to do work with joy and ease, and that you don't have to grind all the time. And so part of that philosophy is breaking up your tasks into very small increments, 20-minute increments. Spiritual work blocks is what we refer to them as.
Oh,
And the notion is you can do anything for 20 minutes. And if you lose yourself in something for 3 or 4 hours, when you come out of that grind, you're less likely to want to go back in. But if you can commit to something 20 minutes a day for, say, 90 days, you could end up with a best-selling novel or a project completed or what have you. So a little bit of a different way of looking at it, but conceptually, it's the same notion of routine. It lessens the necessity for me to have to constantly recalibrate what to do next. So it's been very helpful for me.
yeah. And those who are listening, there's a lot of entrepreneurs and solo entrepreneurs in the audience, as well as small business owners who have brick and mortar. They have like built-in structure, but the solo entrepreneurs, less so. So I think having that, and you mentioned spirituality, take 45 minutes to an hour every day to reflect on, it's a spiritual with prayer and meditation that I start my day with. And then I'm ready to go and tackle whatever needs to be done today. And
Yeah. I do the same thing. I do the same thing, Paul. It's breath work, meditation, and prayer, and some stretching. But it's I look forward to it every day, and when I'm done, I feel different. I feel completely ready to go.
Yeah, it's a great feeling, and I do it with my wife, so it's even
Awesome.
better because we get that time together. We don't do a lot of talking, but we're there together, present, to start the day. And we do the same thing at night. We have a routine at night that we do. So having a routine, I discovered Hal Elrod in The Miracle Morning, which is we incorporated some of those things into our morning, in addition to our prayer, because it just makes sense. And pick up that book if you want to learn more about it. But,
thank you. I've heard of it. I've never read it.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And I won't get into that right now, but do you think leaders are born or are they made?
It's a classic question. I think they're both. I feel, and I've analyzed my own journey with regard to this, and I remember a conversation I had with my dad when I was 6 years old on the Little League field when the other kids on the team were dressing like I was dressing because they had identified me as a leader. And I remember telling my dad, he goes, "You know what I mean by that?" He's like, "Dad, I'm 6. I have no idea what you're talking about." But, reflecting back on it, I think I was born one because I think my dad was one. And I think he just kind of handed that to me. It was like, well, this is part of our behavior model. And he was an airline captain. He was a coach. He was a teacher. And I just have always been interested in mentoring and teaching and things of that nature. So I think I was born one. And I know others that I believe were as well. But I think if you have, if one were to assume that you either are born with that because of who raised you, where you were born, and your circumstances, which is probably a logical thing to say.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't have those qualities. They just have not been, they've not been extracted from you yet. They've not yet been identified. So that same person who doesn't get that from his upbringing or home might bump into, and we see this all the time, a teacher, a coach, a guidance counselor, an uncle, someone a little bit older who identifies something in you at a young age and says, "Follow me. I see something in you and I want to help you develop that." And that's why I'm such a big fan of mentorship. I think it's life changing, particularly when you're young. So I think the
Agreed,
answer
yeah.
is both, and I'm not trying to cop out on the answer, but I think it's both. I think you have to have the innate ability, but that's not always obvious until perhaps later on in life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and sometimes we were talking about saints earlier,
Hmm.
uh, and sometimes, how does it go? God doesn't call the equipped; He equips the called.
That's
So
right.
those He calls, He equips. So in other words, circumstances sometimes throw you into leadership roles. And I know
Hmm.
the saints have been that. Moses was one who didn't want to be out in the spotlight and talking and be. He didn't want to be a leader. He just wanted to do his own thing and be,
Hmm.
and inward. He was uh, not ready for the calling that he had, but he did it anyway.
Hmm.
But he had a huge mentor. He had a mentor, and I think mentorship, uh, if you're going to be a mentor, that's super important. It's a great responsibility. But also, if you find yourself in a situation like solo entrepreneurship, that you need to be a leader, to lead your own company, to lead yourself,
Hmm.
having a mentor or a coach in your corner is like golden. I mean, my coach has a coach, and he promotes that. And so if you're looking to grow professionally and personally, having a coach in your corner is priceless. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would agree, and I think today that seems, and I could be wrong, but it seems a bit more obvious, the concept of that when I was young.
Yeah,
This wasn't as this was kind of like it was the
yeah,
blacksmith apprentice thing. It was like there were certain professions that did apprenticeships and mentorships, but it
mhm,
wasn't a foregone conclusion that doesn't matter what you do. If you find someone who's accomplished what you want to accomplish and you have similar worldviews and moral compasses, and you latch onto that person and promise them all the work they could possibly imagine from you in return for the wisdom that they've acquired, you can do that in any profession.
right.
That works everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So in the introduction, we mentioned tactics are useless without a simple strategy. Can you walk us through what that simple strategy is?
Well, yeah, it depends on what the goal would be. But if we use the example of finding a new job, because that's kind of in my wheelhouse,
Hmm.
what I see, and I've seen it my whole life, it's not a function of AI or technology. It was around in the 80s and 90s, and it'll probably be around in another 20 years. Um, I want to find another job, and I'm a project manager in the healthcare space. So I'm going to go pay somebody $500 to polish my resume, which is, I won't use profanity, but let's call it BS, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to throw it around online. I'm going to throw it into openings that are online, many of which don't exist anymore, many of which are not humans on the other end. And this
Mm.
notion that the tactic is polish up your resume, polish up your LinkedIn profile, and start throwing resumes out there and wait for the response. And then adhere to all of the rules of the process, even if they don't work. And so, that is a perfect example of engaging in tactics without any strategy at all.
Yeah.
Because you've blown right by the idea that it's also a time to revisit what it is you're doing, why
Mm.
you're doing it, and whether this is what you want to do moving forward. Because what I found, Paul, I don't know what your experience is, most people get to middle age and they're doing something because someone told them that's what they should do when they were 17, and they're just still doing it.
Yeah.
There's no purpose to it, there's no passion to it. So, and I'm not finding fault, I'm just saying that's human nature. So I think we're all, and I saw this in all the software project implementations that I staffed, large enterprise SAP ones to much smaller mom and pop shops. Let's execute, let's implement. I'm like, well, we haven't done any discussion about specifications or expectations or change management or as is and to be. We haven't talked about any strategy. You want to stick this piece of software in there. without talking about how it's going to impact everybody that's on the other end of that user interface. So we do it all the time. And I think that it's human nature, regardless of the task. I think we just blow by strategy to get to tactics by habit.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's like when you go fishing. I mean, you know that I mean, I'm not a fisherman, so you've got to put some bait on the end of the hook, and you got to throw it in the water. Well, you should choose the water you're throwing it in, and you should choose the kind of fish that you want to get, because if you're fishing for sport, then any fish will do. But if you're fishing for a meal, you're going to probably want to have maybe not a bottom feeder. You want to have something that's more fresh, or depending on your appetite. But knowing where to, I like to say, if I'm looking for a new client, I'm going to say, well, who else serves that client, and how can I reach them easily? Or so who also has is a healthcare that needs project management. That's a company that's similar to the size or smaller than the one I'm in, because I didn't like the corporate politics, to get into those specifics, so I can say, okay, now I can narrow the field and start looking for the kinds of companies I want to work for, and then find out if I know anybody there.
Yep.
Or if someone in my network knows someone there, so I can start building a relationship with the right people in that. So I think relationships are important, whether you're looking for clients, for vendors, or for a job. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, no question. I think, and I've had this discussion a few times recently about artificial intelligence, and prior to that, it was COVID and masks and interpersonal communication and community and connection, and or lack thereof. And I remember when the job boards came out years ago, Monster and Dice and all those, everyone said, "Oh, recruiters are going to be put right out of business." And no. This is a human interaction, and in the absence of human interaction, it doesn't function well. I mean, you can get a certain number of recs filled, and you can get a job now and then as a human by just sending resumes and going through this dehumanized process. But if you want to get faster to what you deserve, I guess is a good way to say it, then it has to be about relationships. It has to be about communication. It has to be about trust and connection. To me, it has to be.
Yeah, totally. So you have been working with young people, and that was one of the things that was we talked about earlier, that you were really drawn to. Your kids said, us young people, or we young people, are us youths. we don't. I'm making a reference to Cousin Vinny.
It's a great movie. One of my favorite movies.
I know. The youths need to know what we know, and so I'd like to know a little bit about how you were working with the young people in Florida, and maybe you still are. But what one piece of advice would you give to young people today to have that kind of life that they're probably not thinking about at this point? They're thinking about, I just need to be able to pay for my cell phone and my Xbox subscription. But there's more to life than that. So what advice would you give to young people?
Get a paycheck going as quickly as you possibly can. And that establishes that checks one of the boxes. You can start becoming independent. You can start becoming an adult and turning from a boy into a man, whatever the case might be. But don't stop there, right? That's the beginning of the process. That's kind of the X's and O's of the football game, if you will. Now step back and say, all right, let me go back to this more strategic thinking, more thoughtful kind of internal work. Who am I? What do I want to be? Why am I here? While you're collecting a paycheck, even if you're complaining about that job, you're still collecting a paycheck. As my dad used to say all the time, the best time to find a job is when you already have a job. Right. So that would be number one. Too many young people make the mistake of, well, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. That's not enough money or whatever.
And they don't do anything.
Do something. Do something, right? Collect a paycheck and maybe some benefits as well, because it gives you leverage, it gives you confidence, it gives you so many intangible things that you can't get from sitting around doing nothing.
Right.
But then this strategic exercise of self-awareness and self-reflection, internal work on yourself. So the two things that pop into my head when you say young people are give yourself way more permission about the possibilities of what it is that you can do with your life than most people will grant you. Dream a lot bigger, like no boundaries. What if you could do anything you wanted and you never needed money? That's what you want to start thinking about.
Mhm.
And then the second thing we already talked about, find a mentor. I bumped into a mentor early and it wasn't purposeful, but one of the main reasons that I was able to meet him was I was intentionally looking for him, even though I wasn't aware that I was looking for him. I was paying attention. A lot of
Yeah.
kids nowadays, Paul, you might see this too. They just don't pay attention. There's too much noise to focus on any one conversation without your phone on or some TV going or some person walking by. We don't have the ability to do things with intention. And I think that's a learned skill as well. So I would say figure out how to give yourself way more permission than the world wants you to have. And that's just mental exercise, spiritual exercise, perhaps as well. And then find a mentor. But how do you find a mentor until you really go through that process of what it is? What do I really want to do? Because if you're looking for a mentor without doing that first, you're probably going to end up with the wrong mentor.
Right. And that's why what we talked about earlier, just getting a paycheck is not enough. And we talked about why looking for work is broken because we try to do it and disconnect from reality, from the you've got to follow the process, the rules of engagement of Indeed or Glassdoor or Monster or whatever they are today. That's one of the reasons why it's broken. But yeah, getting a paycheck, you've got to get yourself established so that you can start to make a difference because you were given a gift. You were given every one of us has gifts and talents that we were given to us. Some of which we're not even aware of. Some of us, at 67, there are some gifts and talents that I have that aren't fully developed for sure. And some of them I'm probably not even aware of.
Yep.
And so my dad used to always tell me to do a examination of conscience. Or self-reflection. And I did not know what the heck he was talking about.
Yeah.
I had no clue. And it's not something it sounded like any fun. And so I didn't do that until a later age.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, that's what he was trying to say to me.
Well, he's in that regard, he's operating as your mentor in that particular moment, right? And that's the value of a mentor, is this objectivity, this lack of emotional involvement in whatever that decision is. You're in it. You're scared, you're frightened, you're feeling shame or a lack of confidence or whatever comes when you're not ready for whatever it is you're going to do next. But a voice of wisdom that you can love and trust as well does exactly what you're talking about, kind of opens those, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Well, let me give you some context. Let me tell you a story about me with this particular issue when I was younger. That brings that process to life, and it can expedite those things that are not yet developed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I made a promise to my father on his deathbed when I was just getting started in marketing and IT. And we had automated my mom and dad were both doctors. They met in med school. They had a medical practice and I was in computers. And so we were selling medical and dental office billing systems. And so logically, she was one of my first clients. And we had gone live the week he died. And I said, Dad, we finally went live. We discovered $80,000 in unbilled Medicaid, and it's still valid. And we're pushing that through. We're billing electronically with the EDI. This is back in the 80s, which is unbelievable. And I made a promise to him that I would help my mother with carrying forward the business and the business that they started. Little did I know, And it took a lot of self-reflection to realize this, but that became my mission in life, was to help business owners automate and systematize and profit through the systematization of their operations
Hmm.
and their marketing and all those things that go together to make a business grow. So I didn't know that was my mission until someone pointed that out to. I think it was my current wife
Yeah.
that pointed it out to me. And so that could be you, but it could be a much earlier version of me in
Hmm.
your 20s or 30s, having uh, that change of life,
Yep.
that impact from that uncle or that father or from that mentor mentor influence. So how do you how do you seek out to be a mentor? Are there opportunities for people of our age uh, to uh, to go out and say, okay, I've done my corporate gig. I'm reaching, going to retirement area, or I'm looking for something else. I want to make an impact in the world versus I want to do more than just make an income. Are there some options that you would recommend for people to get into this?
That's a really good question that I've never been asked before. I did do a couple of years of volunteer work at SCORE,
Uh-huh.
and SCORE is an acronym, and I don't remember what it stands for, but it is an organization of retired executives. I think it's in Orlando, there's a group of about 50 of these people, men and women that have been business owners before or run large profit centers. And I think those are two very different jobs,
Yeah.
FYI. But because one, you're playing with your own money, and the other, you're playing with someone else's. But anyway, semi-retired and retired, and they have a structure funded by the county, and they have lots of resources. And they offer themselves up as mentors. And so if you have an idea, or you're an aspiring entrepreneur, you're looking for funding, or any stage of the ideation process towards starting your own business, you can engage these people, go in, have meetings. I started with them because I ran there for some advice on some legal contracts. So
Mhm.
I know of that organization, and they're all over the country. I think if you're in a decent sized town or city, you're pretty close to a SCORE office. And like any large spread out organization, some of those branches are really well run, and some of them are a lot less efficient. So I don't make any promises about your local organization, but the organization nationally in general, it's a very valuable organization. They do good work. And I'm sure there are much more local organizations when you get down into the town, city, and county level, but I can't name them. I I walk around projecting that I want to mentor everyone that I talk to. My
Yeah.
challenge is keep quiet, Mark. Make sure that whoever it is that you're going to give advice to actually wants your advice before you start giving it.
That's a hard
Uh,
one.
it's hard when you have that inclination. And
Yeah.
so, but I will say this about that, about me, as I would about any employee when I hired people. It's much easier to pull someone back who's being too aggressive than it is to push someone forward who's not being aggressive enough, at least in my experience. So hopefully I've learned how to pull back a little and waited until someone says, "Hey, Mark, what do you think of that?" So there's two ways. You can seek out an existing organization that's promoting that behavior, and you'd have to do some homework. Or you can just start to do self-reflection and say, if this is what I want to be, then let me start projecting what this is. Let me start sending that energy out to the world that if you want my help, I have experience that might just allow me to do that. And I think people pick up on that.
Yeah, for sure. And and having that positive energy versus the negative, oh, I'm not going to be able to find anyone, that will self-manifest, and that will just bring you more of that.
Yes.
So having a positive, and speaking of mindset, you've worked with people from all walks of life and different specialities and whatnot. What are some of the one or what are some of or the most mindset shift that people uh, need to do or have done to make long-term success happen?
Yeah, that's a long list.
Yeah. I bet. But there's probably there's some commonalities between all those people.
Yeah, yeah. Let me try and think about the top 10 and pull three out that hopefully are in the top five, but I won't guarantee any order. And we've already
Okay.
talked about some of them.
Yeah.
I find a tremendous amount of power in self-reflection.
Mhm.
And you've mentioned it once or twice. I mention it a lot. I think it's the starting point for everything. And I think we do blow right by it. I don't think many of us do
Yeah.
that. And I think it's because there's a bit of arrogance, I suppose, to the like, who do I think I am that I can actually sit here and talk to myself and actually accomplish anything at all? Well, it's not really that, right? It's more just like asking questions and thinking about things. How can I look at this differently? What if I feel strongly about this? What if I'm wrong? What if?
Mhm.
What does that person mean by that? It's not arrogant. It's self-reflection and with humility. So I think that's got to be up there in the top five. It might be number one because I think if you do that well, everything else that you need to do gets a little bit easier. The other
Yeah.
thing similar to that is this notion of permission or dreaming.
Mm.
I remember being 17 years old and having my guidance counselor in high school say, you need to go to a good school, study a business, get a business degree, and then go to work for a Fortune 500 company because that's the safest, most secure, most consistent place for, and you may be there forever, but that's your best bet. Now, she was wrong. She meant well.
Yeah.
She was quite qualified to make the statements that she made. And 35, 40 years ago, there was more truth to that than there is today.
Mhm.
However, it also begins this process of, well, now I'm in this box. I'm a marketing major. I have a business degree. I want to go to work for a big company. Well, what is that? I don't even know what that means, right?
Yeah.
And why do I need benefits when I'm 22? I don't even go to the doctor. Like that's not as important as we're told that it is back at that time.
Yeah.
So get yourself out of your own box, break your box and start thinking like, well, what if, what if, what if, what if I wasn't constrained by the opinions of anyone else? What if I was better at a couple things than I'm giving myself credit for? What if I spent some really focused, intentional time either meditating or praying around this idea that, hey, God, or my higher power, whatever your preference is, there's more to this than me. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about this because I don't want to remain silent about this for the rest of my life. I want to test the limits of this box that I'm in. This dream a lot bigger, and I don't know how to get someone who doesn't believe that to believe it in a short period of time. In my experience, it's been done by executing progressive movement over time to reach a point where it's like, okay, you know what? I can't argue this anymore. I'm actually a lot better at this than I thought because I look at all the practice I've done, you know.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, and I draw the distinction. This will be number three, but I don't believe in breaking laws. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I believe in the rule of law, but I believe in breaking rules all the time.
Yeah.
I think there are so many rules in place, particularly in the how to find workspace or what it means to develop professionally or to be a leader. I think there are so many rules and processes in place that are only in place because that's always the way we've done them, not
Mm.
because they necessarily still make sense. And I could talk about that forever. So I think
Yeah.
that when I coach almost anyone, Paul, there's at least a couple of instances where I say, yeah, you were told that you have to do that. Don't do that. Do this
Mm.
instead. And that person might say, well, they told me I shouldn't do that. And I would be sarcastic and say, well, how's that working out for you? Right. It's like
Yeah.
I think it was Einstein, right? Continue to do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. It's like,
Right.
come on, why you keep banging your head against the wall? So to your point, all three of those things are that same thing, that objective third party coach in
Yep.
your ear, telling you things you can't see or you can't yet wrap your own arms around. And he comes in or she comes in and helps you hug your arms around that thing, whatever it is.
Right. So self-reflection, mentorship, And what was the third one again?
Permission.
Permission.
Yeah.
Right.
Dreaming bigger than you've ever dreamed before.
Yeah. There is a book called, there's a question called the Dan Sullivan question. And so let's just imagine that you're sitting in front of your spouse or your children, in front of your children, and you're saying, okay, we're having this conversation. Imagine that we're having this conversation a year from now, and you want to be number one on your little league baseball team. What had happened? What has happened between now and then? Now and when we had this conversation a year ago, what would have had to have happened to get you to this point? And just shut up.
Yeah.
And see what they say. You'll probably have to do some pulling out and some dreaming with them because they're not used to that kind of question. But I use that with coaching a lot.
Yep.
Or variants of that. Like if I'm doing a project, okay, what would success look like? What had to happen? And so you kind of you backwards re-engineer your success on that project, which is a really powerful way of having them dream, waving the magic wand, so to speak, without any guardrails, is super important, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I know of Dan Sullivan, is very well respected guy, and I think I've heard that reverse engineering is a software engineering term, right? It's a technology term, and it's also a military term. Beginning with the end in mind,
right?
And you can flip that too. I mean, my dad likes to ask me the question, "How you doing today versus where you were 12 months ago today?" That's the reverse. That's reflecting back on what may have worked and what you might want to do more of and what you might want to. So I think both of those exercises, going back into the past and going forward into the future, are healthy exercises.
Yeah. I like your dad. He was a good influence on you.
He's a special guy. Yeah. He's still God bless him. He's 96 years old. I talked to him yesterday. Drives his own car and is on no medication. Goes to church every day.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's the secret to long life there. Wow. And so my father has been gone for many, many years, and I know him better now than I ever did then.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. His impact on that deathbed promise for me has made all the difference in my life, because I finally had a purpose. I always had a purpose, but now I know what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. That's a nice story.
Yeah, for sure. So, Mark, we've already kind of gone through the three things that people can do to put these ideas into action. How can people learn more about you and get into your world, and know a little bit more about professional development that you offer?
Yeah, well, in the pregame, you had graciously volunteered to put a couple of those contact points in the show notes. So that would be, keep your eyes peeled for the show notes. But I think my website, which is a company name that I established years ago, the number 7 and then the words pillars, PILLARS, global.com. But I also redirected my own name. I got my domain is my name, markaylward.com, forwards to that same website. And you can get to all my stuff from there, but the other window would be my LinkedIn profile, where I'm very active. I just looked the other day, I've written over 150 articles on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of good free content there, and on my YouTube channel, and you can get everywhere from my website and my LinkedIn profile. I would say beyond that, if you find that those things and they resonate with you, if you want to talk to me, I do offer a 30-minute free consultation where we just talk about what's going on and I ask you some questions. I've developed that skill pretty well over almost 40 years to get to the root of what it is you need in a few minutes. And then I'll tell you at the end of that call if I can help you, and if I can, I'll tell you how. And if I can't, I'll tell you that I can't and why I don't think that I can. And usually that's just people aren't ready yet. As opposed to anything else. But that 30-minute consultation, sometimes that ends up being an epiphany for people. It's very effective. It's very quick. and it doesn't cost you anything. Otherwise,
Yeah.
read all my stuff and watch all the videos and see if you can't pull some things out of there that will help you. I'm sure that you will, because a lot of those are based on some of the mistakes I made, so you don't have to.
Yeah, and you can get that 30-minute consult with him at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com/Mark Aylward Pro. That's MarkAlyward Pro, as in professional development. So again, www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com/Mark Aylward Pro. So Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about just the various things. I hope, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like our audience to know?
Yeah, I'm sure there is, Paul. I want to be respectful of your time, because, if you get me going on another interesting topic for me, we'll be here for another 45 minutes. And I know that you've got another meeting to get to. So, but I would love to be back on if you wanted to go into some other topics. So I don't want to avoid that question, but I want to be respectful to you and your audience.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much. And remember, as we sign off, remember, faith and action go hand in hand. So keep the pedal to the metal. Until the next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show, I'm Paul Guyon and Mark Aylward. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lead Machine Growth Show with Paul Guyon, where we show you how to tackle your tech, master your message, and design your dream so that you can transform your vision into reality. Remember to visit our website at www.leadmachinegrowthshow.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Lead Machine Growth Show.